Hello, everybody. Hello. Once again, we're honored today to have with us a man of men, a person of knowledge, integrity, and patriotism in the true American way, Judge Andrew Napolitano. And the article that's going out tomorrow that he has written is what's basically all the major news today, but really what it means and what's next for Donald Trump. So, Judge, thanks for being on today.
Pleasure, Gerald.
You know, you have this new article coming out, and it's called The Case Against Donald Trump. It gives me no joy, you write, to write about prosecuting former President Donald J. Trump. He and I have been friends for nearly 40 years. We spoke many times during his presidency on a wide array of matters. Knowing him as I do and knowledgeable of the law, and you are knowledgeable of the law, and federal criminal procedure. You ready for this, everybody? I can state that he is his own worst enemy, and the feds, of whom I am often highly critical, had no choice but to indict him.
Now, why do I say that? If you look at the indictment, Gerald, and I hate discussing this because I know him and actually love him, but this is a very dangerous area for him. The source of the evidence against him in that indictment is his own mouth, his own words, on tape, boasting about holding secret plans to invade Iran after he left the White House, acknowledging they were secret and that he shouldn't have them, and knowing the tape wasn't being made. This is not like the feds were bugging his phones. He agreed to sit with an author and a ghostwriter and some publishers for a friend of his who's doing a book about his years in the White House and just talk extemporaneously. And so, by the way, take a look at this. Battle plans showing U.S. military strengths and weaknesses, Iran strengths and weaknesses, Iran nuclear capabilities that have to be avoided. And he says it's secret. I could have declassified it, but I didn't, and I still have it. Feds have all of that. The feds have testimony from his own lawyer against him. Well, how could a lawyer testify against a client? All right, so here's the attorney-client privilege in a nutshell. You're the lawyer. The client comes to you and says, I expect to be indicted for robbing a bank. What are my defenses? The money was yours. The bankers are crazy. The bank is always after me. I wasn't there. I was 1,000 miles away, whatever the defenses are. Conversation is protected. But if a client comes to the lawyer and says, I plan to rob a bank, what will my defenses be? That conversation is not protected. Why? Because the rules say there is no attorney-client privilege when the client uses the lawyer or the lawyer uses the client to perpetrate a fraud or commit a crime. In this case, a federal judge found that Trump lied to his own lawyers, and they in turn lied under oath to a federal grand jury, saying that all the documents had been returned, whereas in reality, there were over 300 still in Trump's possession. And then after the federal judge found there was no attorney-client privilege because he duped his own lawyers into lying, the lawyer testifies before a grand jury and says, oh, and by the way, he asked me to take the documents to my hotel room and make them disappear. So all of this evidence against him coming from his own mouth, his own worst enemy. He told his co-defendant, the feds are coming, hide the boxes. They both forgot there are 50 video cameras, Trump's own video cameras in Mar-a-Lago, and the feds had the tapes. They showed this guy taking boxes out of the storage room on day one, feds going through the storage room on day two, putting the boxes back in the storage room on day three. The feds have all this. Then they call this guy before the grand jury. Did you take boxes out of the storage room and put them back? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, then they indict him for lying to the grand jury as well as hiding these documents because Donald Trump asked him to do it. So Trump assumed that whatever he told his lawyers would remain secret. And by the way, when I was in law school, I'll show you how old I am, and we're We're about the same age, my dear friend. The attorney-client privilege was absolute. There were no exceptions. This crime fraud exception is about 35 years old. So he thought that what he said to his lawyers and what he said to the people that work for him would be absolutely secret. They both forgot about the cameras everywhere. You can't go to the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago without a camera catching you.
You know, you mentioned about, let's say, okay, he did all this, but, what's the big deal?
Well, that's a very good question. If crime is harm, who was harmed?
Yeah.
Only the ego of the federal government was harmed. But the government does protect these documents because the sources of the documents are often double agents. So the government had Iranian Revolutionary Guards also working for the CIA. Their names are in these documents. They're not the actual names, identifying materials. If that ever got out, they would suffer the most horrific deaths imaginable. That's why the government protects it. Did any of this get out? We don't know, but there's no allegation that it did get out. The only allegation is that he possessed it. He claims the documents are his. Under the law, they belong to the federal government. Now, what about the Presidential Records Act? The Presidential Records Act says documents the president creates or causes to be created, documents he prepares, things that he signs, they can be kept by the president, but not documents he receives from the CIA or the FBI or the NSA or the DOD. Those documents belong to the federal government. So the fact that there was no harm, unfortunately, is not a defense. I don't know what his defense is going to be. And to make matters worse, on the day these indictments came out, his two leading lawyers quit. Not the lawyers that he lied to, who are referred to by lawyer A and lawyer B in the indictment. We all know who they are. They're not involved in this case. But the two lawyers that have been representing him for the year and a half that this case has been going on quit. What does that mean? Gerald, there are more than 1 million pages of documents in this case, 1 million. Whoever the new legal team is, and as of this morning, the day after the arraignment, he still doesn't have a new legal team. Whoever that new legal team is going to have to examine all those documents. So he's at a tremendous disadvantage there. Now, he may be dumb like a fox. He may have fired his lawyers so that he'd have a basis to say to the trial judge, well, 1 million pages of documents, my lawyers need a year to get through all that. And if she accepts that and the trial is delayed until after the election, well, that could have a very different outcome than if the trial is before the election. Who knows? I'm trying to think the way I know he thinks.
This sounds like Netanyahu.
There was testimony in Netanyahu's case yesterday.
Yeah, for everybody who don't know what's going on, Netanyahu, this is the prime minister of Israel, who has been indicted, right? For
their trials do not go 8 hours a day like ours do. They do a day here, they adjourn for a month, a day there. He's on trial for bribery. The testimony against him is very, very strong. That's why he's trying to alter the power of the judicial branch so that they cannot sustain what he expects will be a conviction. He fully expects to be convicted. The jury there is a jury of professional jurists. It's not a lay jury like we have here in the United States.
So going back to what Trump revealed, to me, one of the big issues here that's really being overlooked is the United States was planning to attack Iran.
Thank God he rejected that. What we don't know is if he asked for it or they just gave it to him. It's not the type of thing that they hear. You know who signed this document? I know you're not a fan of him, and neither am I. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
This came from the highest military source in the land. He must have asked for it, and thank God he didn't do it. Invade Iran. You talk about World War III. The Israelis would have gotten involved. All of the Middle East would have gotten involved. Russia's like that with Iran. Russia would have gotten involved. That would have been insane. So why he asked for it, who knows? But thank God it didn't go anywhere.
But this is really important. In a taped conversation, he boasted that he had his hands on documents showing plans for U.S. military invasion of Iran. This is the same.
Why were they even talking about this?
No, I know. But this is the same Trump, by the way, that ordered the slaughter of General Soleimani.
Correct.
Of Iran.
Correct.
As Soleimani was going to Iraq to do a peace deal.
Correct.
Allegedly.
They slaughtered him in an allied country, Iraq. Well, he was going to have lunch with his opposite number in the Iraq military about getting rid of the 25-year absurd, religiously based animosity between Iraq and Iran, and Trump has him obliterated by a drone. Oh, it's an act of homicide. Joe Biden's done the same thing. George W. did the same thing. Barack Obama did it all the time. Barack Obama actually used drones on Americans.
That's right.
And claimed he had the authority to do it. These guys, I wrote a piece, you and I talked about it about a year ago, called Why Do Presidents Kill? The short answer is because they can get away with it.
Oh, it's because they're mentally deranged and evil. I mean, anybody that kills, whether you're a president or you're a member of the Bloods and the Crips, I mean, what's the difference? Correct. Oh, I'm a president. I can kill anybody I want, and it's just fine. I'm doing it under the law. I will.
Right.
You talked about Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner. That's quoted in the book Double Down. Quote, I'm really good at killing people.
Yes, that's outrageous, repellent, repulsive, immoral, unconstitutional, and unlawful. We, when I was at Fox at the time, and we went crazy trying to get the legal authority that Eric Holder, his then Attorney General, relied on for him to kill these Americans. The guy's name was Anwar al-Awlaki. He actually was a friend of Donald Rumsfeld, whom Rumsfeld brought to the Pentagon to explain the Middle Eastern mentality to all senior Pentagon generals. He was born in New Mexico. His kid was born in Virginia. He and the kid was 16. The kid's male buddies, so about 4 or 5 of them, were seated in an outdoor cafe in Yemen, and an American drone obliterates all of them.
Yeah.
Suddenly, in the NBC newsroom, and nobody knows where this came from or how they got it, is a copy, NBC newsroom, is a copy of a memo from Eric Holder to Barack Obama explaining the legal authority for killing these Americans. So I called up a buddy at NBC. We had it in a heartbeat. I read it. I went on air and I said, this is absurd. They are likening the president of the United States murdering Americans who are peacefully sitting at a cafe drinking a cup of tea to cops shooting back at bank robbers when they're in a cops and robbers chase and they're each shooting at each other. And as the cops had the authority to shoot at the bank robbers who were shooting at them, Obama had the authority to kill these Americans. It made no sense whatsoever. A first-year law student submitting a document like that would have flunked the course.
You mentioned that Eric Holder. What an arrogant guy he is. He has a track record that shows you what a disgusting human beings are running this country. Yes. When he was with Clinton, when he was with Obama, hold this, as I say. Yeah. Holder.
So
arrogant guy.
But it goes to your point. The Bloods and the Crips kill each other for some insane gang-related reason. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. It's immoral. Presidents kill, and they believe it is constitutional and moral because nobody's going to prosecute them. Because they have a lousy piece of paper that a first-year law student would have flunked if he signed his name or her name to it, and is relying on that. Barack Obama, the so-called constitutional scholar from the University of Chicago Law School, relying on a piece of garbage as authority to assassinate, to murder an innocent, peaceful American and his teenage child.
What is this? Some 20,000 drone strikes or something that Obama launched, or
I
some?
think that's about right. It was a
Yeah.
huge number. They actually stopped. One thing about Trump is he published these. Excuse me. One thing about Obama is he published these numbers, and the numbers were overwhelming and nauseating. But he did publish them. We assumed the publication was true. Big deal. He's killing people, and he's telling us about it. And as you point out in this book, boasting about it.
Yep. No, this, I just got an email from someone, a very well-known person, and said to me that, you're holding these peace rallies, but you're really wasting your time because people really don't care. And, it's great that you're doing them, he said, but you're wasting your time having them. And, it breaks my heart because to some extent it's true.
To some extent, it is true. They're more interested in the garbage of American culture today, whatever the latest nonsense is. I don't know. It was a Succession story on television that everybody talked about for 3 weeks. I never watched it and couldn't care less about it. I'm sure you're the same. They care more about that than they care about American bodies are soon going to be in body bags because old Joe has been talking about having American pilots in those F-16s, and they will be shot down by Russian anti-aircraft equipment.
And speaking of what's going on in Ukraine, last week was $2 billion more. This week, another $350 million more. Oh, you're down there not far, I guess, from that I-95 in Pennsylvania, that the truck blew up, right? And when it caught fire, they say it's going to take a couple of months to fix. If this was China, the damn thing would be fixed in a week.
Correct.
And you go everywhere around a rotted infrastructure near you, as we're spending billions of dollars to send over to Ukraine to fight a war that's none of our business. They just passed that debt ceiling thing, almost $1 trillion to the defense budget, as this country's rotting in front of us.
That deal that they passed, which would not have passed without Republican support, the Republicans stand for nothing today, allows Janet Yellen to borrow all the money she wants. Now, She needs $4 trillion. She can go borrow $10 trillion. You know what that's going to do to interest rates if she goes out into the market and tries to get $10 trillion? She already is trying to borrow $1 trillion before Christmas, and that's pushing interest rates up. These people don't understand the natural and probable consequences of their behavior. A generation of Americans as yet unborn, their income taxes will be used to pay the interest on the debts she's incurring today. And at the rate they're doing it, in 12 years, 2035, trillion to defense, trillion to interest, trillion to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Well, that only leaves $1.5 trillion to spend on the rest of the government.
They know what they're doing. They don't care. That's basically the bottom line. And going back to Ukraine, yesterday, Putin said that he could order his troops to try to seize more land in Ukraine to protect Russian territory on the border, while asserting, quote, Ukraine forces have suffered catastrophic losses in their new counteroffensive. He said Ukraine has lost 160 tanks, more than 360 armored vehicles in recent days, but Russia's lost 54 tanks. So the war keeps heating up. The United States, the UK, and NATO have pledged to keep sending more armaments to keep blooding the killing fields.
To use Joe's words, quote, forgive me for interrupting you, Gerald, for as long as it takes, closed quote.
Yep.
And they have no off ramp. They really think that Ukraine can win this war, even though the documents that that kid in Massachusetts supposedly is the sole source of, they don't challenge the accuracy or authenticity. Those documents show that the American military command, the same human beings that gave Trump that memo about invading Iran, have concluded that Ukraine is going to lose the war. And still we're sending billions. And still they're slaughtering innocents, Russian boys, Ukrainian boys.
Well, Judge, thanks a lot. And one final question, and going back to Trump and the article that that's going out tomorrow, what do you think the bottom line is going to be?
Knowing his personality, knowing him as I do, he's not going to accept any kind of a plea deal, even a plea deal to jaywalking. So I think there will be a trial. It'll make the OJ trial look like a jaywalking case. It'll truly be the trial of the century. But because it's in federal court, it won't be televised, but everybody will be watching it with bated breath, particularly when he takes the stand. You can't make this up. He takes the stand in his own defense. Oh, God.
And you think that'll happen after the election?
No, I think it'll happen very soon. This is a judicial district called a rocket docket, meaning they try cases within 6 months of indictment. I think this federal case will be tried before the one in New York. The one in New York is a little crazy and a little convoluted. This one's far more straightforward, and this one will probably come up first. And he's got 2 more that he hasn't even been indicted yet.
Oh,
January 6th and the shenanigans in Georgia. Those indictments are coming before Labor Day.
well, Judge, again, everybody listening, what you're hearing from the judge, you're not hearing anywhere else. Again, only the facts, and that's what we do at the Trends Journal. We only give you the facts. And don't forget to tune in to Judging Freedom with Judge Napolitano.
Colonel McGregor today at 3 o'clock Eastern.
Well, tell him I said hello. What a man he is.
Oh, yes, I will.
There's the judge's website, so make sure you go there and do what you can to support the truth, because we're doing everything we can to give you the truth in trends and the truth in the true American spirit. Thanks so much, Judge.
Thank you, Gerald. Always a pleasure.